This is James Corbett of CorbettReport.com, continuing our coverage of the ongoing Climategate scandal, as bombshell after bombshell continues to emerge from the leaked emails and documents that have come out from behind the academic Berlin Wall of the Climate Research Unit at the University of East Anglia. In one of the latest developments, the Viscount Monckton of Brenchley and Professor Fred Singer have filed a joint request with the UK Information Commissioner to investigate the possible criminal wrongdoings of the scientists involved in this scandal. Joining me on the line to talk about this latest development is Lord Monckton. Lord Monckton, thank you for taking the time to join me once again on the Corbett Report.
It's a great delight to be with you.
Well, why don't we start by talking about the basis for this report and why you filed it?
Well, I think most people know the background now, which is that a series of revelatory emails from within the Climate Research Unit at the University of East Anglia, which produces one of the four major global temperature data sets on which the entire global warming scan is funded, has been released by a whistleblower showing deep and close and sinister connections between the Climate Research Institute and many other climate scientists around the world who have been the most prominent in telling us that we have a global warming problem. And one of the things that these people have been emailing each other about is that they don't want to give out any information about the computer programs and data they use to compile the temperature record that tells us it has got as warm as it has during the 20th century. They have been working, as we now know, for years, plotting for years, to make sure that information necessary so that other scientists can check and replicate their work shall not be given to those scientists who request it, even though we have a Freedom of Information Act in the UK which requires that such information, particularly if it was paid for, as it was, by taxpayers' money, should be made available to any legitimate inquirer. There was a legitimate inquirer, Steve McIntyre of Canada, who knows a great deal about the compilation of temperature records. He put in a sensible and valid series of information requests, and Professor Jones at the University of East Anglia put out an email to his colleagues after that request was received saying, "We do not want to answer this material, so therefore please will you destroy all your emails about how we worked together on the UN's fourth assessment report telling us the climate was a problem." He said, destroy the data. Now that is a criminal offence. We have reported Professor Jones and the university and the Freedom of Information Officer there and the Climate Research Unit to the Information Commissioner, whose job is to make sure the Freedom of Information Act is upheld, and we have asked him to investigate and, if thought fit, to prosecute those responsible for what is not only a very serious breach of the Act itself. Section 77 of that Act, which was passed in 2000, makes it very clear that withholding or destroying information in this way after a valid request is a criminal offence. It's also a very serious breach of the way that true science is done, whereby it is necessary, before we start taking expensive decisions about the climate, to make sure that those who are telling us to take those decisions have done their science correctly. And if they're preventing us from checking, then we have no basis whatsoever for taking any action at Copenhagen or elsewhere to shut down the economies of the West in the name of what we now know, partly from these emails, to be the non-problem of climate change.
So how do you expect this investigation to proceed, and what sort of timeline are we looking at?
Well, that, of course, is very much for the Commissioner to decide, but I would imagine that he will reply to us within the next 7 days. That would be normal, a matter of courtesy, if nothing else. He will then tell us whether he proposes to proceed with an investigation, and if so, how he proposes to set about it, and roughly how long it will take. These things are never quick. After all, we are dealing with a criminal offence which carries the very highest level of financial penalty. You can't get sent to prison for this, but you can certainly be fined enough money to be noticeable to you. So he will want to be very careful before he decides to recommend to the Director of Public Prosecutions that there should be an indictment here, but he will want to investigate. That will take time. So I wouldn't hold my breath. I don't think we can expect anything very quick after this process. What we can expect, I think, is that scientists worldwide will now begin to realize that the criminal prosecuting authorities are beginning to move in on them, and particularly those who have profited, or profiteered rather, by peddling false and exaggerated science, whether they are scientists themselves, politicians, or people in the environmental movement who have been exaggerating the supposed threat of climate change in the way that we now know that the University of East Anglia was doing. If that is a widespread problem, then the fraud authorities are also going to be moving in on the University of East Anglia and on the scientists linked with them in what looks like a small, tightly controlled conspiracy to bend, falsify, and exaggerate the supposed problem of climate change.
Tell us about Professor Fred Singer and his involvement in this report.
Well, Professor Singer and I are both named, and indeed named in the same sentence in one of these emails, in the most uncomplimentary of terms. We're referred to as charlatans. Now, this insult was provoked by the fact that one of the team, that is this group of scientists worldwide, mainly in America and Britain, who have been manufacturing, manipulating, and driving this climate scare, had written to me to challenge an assertion by me that the United Nations, in its fourth assessment report, had halved its maximum sea level rise as predicted from its third report. And I had replied perfectly sensibly to this perfectly sensible email, saying that I had reasons for saying that this was indeed a halving of the previous forecast of sea level rise, and that I was indeed comparing like with like. And in a very civilized way, the member of the team concerned had written back and agreed with me that I had indeed been comparing like with like, and was, on the whole, making reasonable points. He didn't agree with everything I was saying, but he did agree with that one. He was then roundly criticized by his colleagues in the team for having conducted any correspondence either with Professor Singer, who is a very eminent climatologist from the United States, or with me, describing both of us as charlatans. That was the attitude which most members of the team, this group, this clique of conspirators and crooks, had towards anyone who disagreed with them. So because both Professor Singer and I were named in these emails, and because the professor happened to be staying with me here in Scotland when the news broke, he and I decided that we would write at once to the Commissioner and say that the conduct of the team in setting up this climate scam and in then trying to suppress, in particular, the data and the methods and the computer programs that they'd used so that other scientists couldn't verify it, was unacceptable and was a criminal offence, and we wanted investigated.
All right, well, Lord Monckton, this is an important development, so if people want to stay up to date with all of the latest information about this report, what's the best way they can do that?
Well, in the light of the numerous requests I've had from around the world to be kept in touch with how things are going on not just this, but the entire climate scandal, because it goes much wider than just what the University of East Anglia has been doing. We are now able to look via these emails into other universities around the world where these crooks and conspirators have been compiling this bogus case of climate alarm. We are setting up a blog at scienceandpublicpolicy.org, which should go live in the next few days. And on that blog, I will be keeping people up to date on how we're getting on with investigating this fraud, because I am also trying to talk to the police, whom the University of East Anglia are themselves consulting, so that we can find out whether the police will also investigate not just who was the whistleblower who released these emails and whether he committed an offence, which I don't think he did, because we have laws encouraging whistleblowing in these circumstances in the UK, but also whether the police will investigate what looks to us not just like a little bit of information withholding, which is a criminal offence under the Information Commissioner's remit, but also financial and scientific fraud on a global scale. We think that that should now be investigated. I will be consulting the police here. I'm in touch with senators and their offices in the United States to get them to make similar inquiries there, so that these fraudsters, whether in politics or science or in the green movement, will now be rounded up, have their collars felt, be arrested, tried, prosecuted, and jailed for the billions and billions of dollars that they have wrenched from the pockets of ordinary tax-paying citizens who have to work hard for their living and should not have to pay for these extravagant scientific frauds ever again.
Lord Monckton, thank you for taking the time to talk with me today.
And thank you.